Hello everyone, welcome to Inside Battlefield, our very first Battlefield podcast. So I'm pretty excited to be here with you all today. My name is Tom, I'm a community manager here at DICE. So what we're doing today is a podcast series. We'll talk all things Battlefield, a nice casual discussion with some of the developers who'll join us. Today I'm joined by Florian and Oliver. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Oh yeah, hello. I am Florian Le Bihan. I am a lead game designer here at DICE, and I mostly work with stuff related to the soldier experience, and in this case today, the rework that we're doing with classes.
The return to the class system. What about you, Oliver?
Yeah, my name is Oliver Andersen. I am a software engineer and tech lead in this team for this feature, and I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, folks, a little bit of an overview about what you can expect from our podcast series. So, we'll run for a total of 7 weeks at first, and we'll cover a variety of topics. Today, we're here to talk about the return to the class system. So, the 3.2 update will go live later this month. And in this update, we will return classes back to the battlefield. So, it's a very exciting time for us. Like, we're
Finally
very much looking forward to this. So, we'll take a deep dive into how that will play out, what our expectations are, and how we went about bringing this feature back to the battlefield. If at any time you have any questions for us, please reach out to us at podcast@battlefield.com or just, tag us on @battlefield on Twitter. We would love to hear from you. We will have a dedicated Q&A podcast a few weeks from now after update 3.2 is live, where we'll answer questions you may have coming out of the update, so we're looking forward to that. I think let's dive in and let's start talking Battlefield.
Yeah,
are you ready?
Let's kick this off.
Let's go. Okay, so folks, let's dive in. Before we do so update 3.2 will be the episode for next week, where we'll cover the breakaway rework. There's new vault weapons coming to the battlefield. The tanks are getting the active protection system, and we'll add below radar to our aircraft as some of the highlights. So we'll go through all the changes with you next week. There's much more to talk about. But first, before we go into the return to the class system, let's talk about what's available for play this week. So let's take a look at our weekly radar. So on Tuesday is when our new rotation comes into play. So that's when you'll be able to play the new game modes. So this week, we have a community spotlight called Gunfight Royale. So this is actually created by some of our community members, or inspired by, so Mencour and Dirty Breaks. So shout out to both of you. It's a very cool mode. It's a free-for-all, random loadouts, very fast-paced gameplay. First to reach 3 points wins. So I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's a fun mode.
It's a fun mode. Like, we had a lot of fun playtesting this ourselves.
Yeah.
So looking forward to getting it in your hands. We have Rush Hardcore. Pretty straightforward. Rush, pretty hardcore. It's if you enjoy hardcore and Rush, then this is gonna be your mode. And then later in the week with the second rotation, we've got Tactical Conquest coming back. So if you played our first mid-season event, the Liquidator event, that's fast-paced, smaller map layout, like really squad-paced gameplay.
Yeah, more tactical and squad-focused. I really like that mode in Season 1, so I'm excited to have it back.
Yeah, so we had some really good feedback when it first came out, so we made a few tweaks to make it even better, so looking forward to getting that in your hands. And then we have Torment. So Torment, as it's in the name, is a gameplay mode based on all-out warfare with our Tor railgun tank. Yeah. So it's going to be pretty chaotic. Looking forward to that as well. And then lastly, on Friday, we have Friday Night Battlefield, Breakthrough Mayhem. So I think, Florian, this you like your breakthrough, you like your chaos.
Oh, yeah.
So that's going to be...
that's going to be so much fun.
Yeah. So this week, I think if you're like a fan of
chaotic
gameplay, there's something for you here. So we're looking forward to seeing you in game. But let's dive into the return to the class system. Yes. Big topic. It's been in the works for quite a while. Very excited about it. Let's dive in. Guys, how are you feeling? Are you ready to talk class system? The return to class system?
We've been ready for a while to talk about that. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see this come out to our players finally.
Yes.
And to be able to talk about it.
Yes, and so before we dive in, one more thing. We do have a new blog available on our website right now. It's the Dev Notes Return to the Class System. So it's kind of an overview of the journey we took, how we got to this update, because it's for us, it's been a long time in the making. And I know it's something you as a team worked on to get out to players as well, like the blog.
Yeah, we wanted to kind of shed some light on our thought process, like developing this feature and kind of how it evolved over time.
We invite you to go check it out. It's available now on the Battlefield website. So let's talk Return to the Class System.
Yes. So where to start?
Where to start? Yeah, I think I'm actually going to start with a sip of coffee first. Like maybe we all should, and then we'll dive in. Yeah, so maybe Florian, let's start with you. Can you maybe give us a summary of what we are actually doing here? Because we're bringing back classes to Battlefield 2042, but it's not that simple. There's a lot of work involved. So can you start with giving us an overview of the main changes we are bringing?
Yes, so what we're doing, we are reintroducing classes, and by that I mean that we're making some of the gadgets restricted to classes. So, for example, an engineer will have the rocket launchers, whereas support or an assault will not have access to those. So we're making sure that every classes has a role on the battlefield. So if what you want is to support your team, you will spawn in as a support specialist. If you want to spot or if you want to give intel to your team, you will spawn in as a recon. And same goes for every other classes. So now there's a lot more purpose when it comes to what you want to do on the battlefield. You're no longer able to just select everything, which has been a bit of a problem for us in the past. I mean, there's been a lot of things we've been looking at based on community feedback, which we'll probably be talking a bit more about.
Definitely.
We're also introducing 2 extra things. One of those is the class gadget. So every classes will now have access to a unique gadget that they will always have access to. So before you had 2 gadgets, now you have 3. And that extra one will be the signature gadget of your class. So for example, if you're playing support, you always have access to the defibrillator. If you are playing as an engineer, you always have access to the repair tool. So if a tank in your team sees you, they know that now you will always be able to get assistance from an engineer, which before was not really the case. The repair tool was not really used that much. So making that a primary, always usable gadget is going to be very helpful. So we have that for all classes. The last addition is the weapon proficiencies. So weapons are staying open the way they are, the way they've always been, I mean. But we're adding an extra thing on top of the weapons if you're playing them in a certain class. So for example, if you're playing assault, you will have some benefits with assault rifles specifically. If you're playing recon, that's the same. Sniper rifles are better in the hands of recon. What we have, for example, with sniper rifles and recon is that you can hold your breath for much longer and also a bit faster. So if you want to play with sniper rifles, it's probably a little better on recon, but it doesn't mean you cannot play sniper rifles with other classes.
Yeah. So I guess we encourage you to play, like if you want to play that recon role, that class, like you are encouraged to play with sniper rifles, but you don't have to.
Exactly.
So you still have that freedom of choice.
Yeah, we really wanted to encourage instead of like force you into something, because that's like the best thing. You have to pick it. That's what we wanted to avoid, instead of like encouraging you to pick it.
Okay, that's great. And I think, Oliver, something that is very important for us is to, and Florian already mentioned it, we had a lot of freedom in game, and we really want to bring back the structure that our players are used to from maybe our previous Battlefield titles that had the class system.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for us as a team to really put that structure back on the battlefield?
It's really nice, like starting as a player, since that's how I started in Battlefield. I was a player or a fan, and just having like being able to expect something from your teammates, to see like this is an engineer, as your example was. I know they can repair, or I know the support can always revive me, or the recon has the spawn beacon. Like those expectations are very nice to have, because it kind of brings a structure to the battlefield that I think gives you more things to think about and kind of relate. And even like when you spot an enemy, you can expect the same thing. So I think, and then as a developer, it's just really nice to kind of go back to something that I think worked really well in previous Battlefields.
That's actually an interesting question you brought up. Like, as a developer, was it difficult for, I guess, both of you in this case to develop when we had a lot of freedom before, and like that structure makes it that we have in place now makes it easier to define what we want to get out of each class on the battlefield?
I think there's different things to it. I mean, first, the fact that you had a lot of choices before meant that a bunch of the gadgets that we had in the game were not used, and some gadgets that were arguably the most versatile and were useful in most scenarios would be probably overly used. I mean, we have some data that shows that the most picked gadget in the game is the Carl Gustav on any specialist in the game, simply because it's really useful, right? You have to deal with vehicles quite often. Sometimes you can even use it against soldiers. You can destroy parts of buildings at times. So that makes it like a go-to choice all the time. And behind that, we have a few choices that are also very often picked, like the ammo crate or the C5. And then you get to see that the rest of the list is not really used that much. So it means that you get a lot of what we call min-maxing behavior in the game, where players just end up playing with exactly the same stuff all the time. So while you're thinking that you have a lot of choice, because of the fact that there's always going to be outliers that you will want to play all the time, you actually don't get to change things too much. So things are a bit stale. With classes, we're spreading those choices across the classes, so you will not be able to have the rocket launcher if you want to play as a recon. So that means that now you really have those roles, and those roles will also add some team play. If you want to deal with tanks, well, you need to bring an engineer to your squad. If you want someone to revive you, to give you health or ammo, you will have to bring a support. That goes for all classes. So for us, the structure actually adds choices, right? We're making restrictions, but we're actually adding choices, because you have to think about what you want to play. You have to think about the different situations you're going to be in. And that also kind of goes for weapons, right? I mean, the weapon proficiency, while it's not really forcing you into playing certain classes, if you're thinking you're going to play in closer ranges and you also want to revive, well, you'll be bringing an SMG to most gunfights, which is pretty good in close range. And you have the proficiency for SMGs that makes them even better if you're playing as a support. So those kind of things really, I think, add choices because you have roles now. And on top of that, I mean, one of the problems we've had to deal with is the fact that because we had every single gadget available, it was hard to balance gadgets as a whole. For example, again, like the main one that I can call out because everyone can relate to is rocket launchers. We've made rocket launchers arguably weaker than they've ever been in previous battlefields, just because everyone could have a rocket launcher. So when you're a vehicle player and you see up to 64 players in the enemy team that can have rocket launchers, well, we have to kind of do something. Otherwise, the vehicle players will really feel like they are being targeted by missiles all the time. Now, if all of those are only available within certain classes, that actually gives us an opportunity to make them a bit stronger, back to where they were before, because you have less of them, and they will feel more, unique, and they will feel a bit stronger because they're really part of the role. Like you have a rocket launcher, you're an engineer, you're dealing with vehicles, whereas before we really had to keep them kind of like weaker, really. So I think that's a really great opportunity for us to just reevaluate the balance of the game overall, make choices more interesting, and making sure that there's extra teamwork.
I want my rocket launcher to be like pack a punch. That really, like, now it allows us to kind of make those changes and alter the balance.
And when talking about balance, I think an interesting topic that I would love for us to dive into as well is how we utilize player feedback to really get to the final state of this update and the return to the class system that we're bringing to the battlefield. So let's talk about how we got there as well. So I think we started late last year with our core feedback, where we showed players what our initial plan was. through a series of blogs and open dialogue. So, I mean, based on that alone, we already got a ton of feedback. So, do you guys maybe want to explain, like, when we had the first iteration of feedback, like it was still early in our stages of development, what our learnings were there, and any changes were,
I could just start off with saying, like, player feedback has been like a crucial thing in this whole feature. Like we've heard players giving feedback from the launch of the game, and also like that they actually responded to our questions as we posted these blogs. It's been like a vital part, and as you said, we did like early validations of our designs, which is like, I think that's this feature is the one we've made done that the most for this game, which I think is really cool as a developer, since it gets us closer to players.
Yep.
I think it's a learning opportunity as a whole. Like the work we've done with this effort has taught us that if you really want to deliver a feature to quality, trying to include players into that is going to be the best you can do. Because we were saying that earlier, the way we play internally in our playtest, which we do every day, is very, very different from the way players play. So if you're going to try to evaluate the success of changes you're making solely based on the internal feedback that you're getting, you're not going to hit the quality level you'd like to have.
Yeah, like we playtest every day at the studio, so we have a lot of feedback internally, which is like it's still important. But as you say, we play the game in a different way than actual players do.
Yes, and this change in particular is a very core change to the game. Yep. It's touching everything from soldier gameplay to vehicle gameplay to general flow. So this slow iterative process that we had has been very important to make sure that we really reach the quality we want. And involving players in that is extremely important. So we're going to release those changes, and we'll still see more feedback from our players.
Definitely.
Because getting to the point where you can understand what's the best way to play the game takes a few weeks, usually 1 to 2 week time for players to adopt the changes and see, okay, how do I want to play this now? What's the best way to play engineer, support? So we'll be reacting to more things in the future based on what we've been doing. So it's going to be more work, most likely.
And I think that's like, it's a really exciting time for 2042 right now, since now a year after launch, like players have really found their the best way to play as they like, and this is a fundamental change to the game, which can actually keep things fresh, since it actually changes the meta.
Yep.
So now players are gonna like have to find new ways and new interactions in the game, and I think a year after launch, that's very exciting. And as you say, all the feedback that's gonna come in, I'm really looking forward to reading all of that.
So the second part is, so we started with the blogs in terms of feedback, and I think then we took a smaller subset of players and actually showed them like our further designs that we took from there to get even more feedback. So how was it for you? So when we have the blogs, it's obviously it's like the wider player base, but how was it to engage directly on that feedback with players in like smaller sessions where you could ask them the questions?
I can actually first shine some light on how the process has been in general, even before that, because we've been looking at feedback from very early on, from the release of the game, where we've started seeing some feedback related to Specialist, the lack of class gameplay that we've had in previous Battlefield games. And again, it's been a slow process where we've been looking at, okay, what is the best way to try to reintroduce classes to Battlefield while keeping the identity of Battlefield 2042? Because we have the product that we have. We can't really just flip everything on its head, but we can try to make sure we introduce those gameplay changes with the product that we have. So this is what we've tried to do. And it took some time, a lot of different design direction that we could have taken, but we have been refining that over time until the point where we had a version that we really wanted to push to players. And this is where we've had the first sessions where we've showed the design to players so that they could get an understanding of how things could be, could start imagining how the games would start playing and give us feedback very early on. And it's been actually a really good first step when we introduced this to players. We've had good reactions. We've had some good feedback that allowed us to do some adjustments to the design. And then based on that, we had the first block boss, right? Where we've shown a first iteration actually on what people didn't really see before publicly, because we've shown that to a restricted group of players. They've seen like another version of what we had. And we've also had some reactions on that. So we also took that feedback into account, and we had another iteration of the design. And then we brought back players again into the loop to make sure that they get an opportunity to give more feedback, but also this time around play the build. I mean, the first version that we had playtestable and could give us feedback on this. And we learned some more based on that, and we did more adjustments. So it's been a very, I would say, exciting process. I mean, for me, I love involving players into this and making sure that we can get their voices heard. Of course, there's always a lot of feedback, so we try to make sure that we act on the main feedback. And sometimes there's small things that we will be taking into account, but we will say, hey, you know what, this is fine for us. This is the way we want this to play. But we can make sure that we get to hear players and deliver to the highest quality we can, because we have this player feedback.
Yeah. So two questions there, like, and we didn't touch upon it that much yet, but like we invited players to play test the game with us, and I think personally I think that it was super awesome. You know, so we played the game as a studio every day, but then suddenly we just had quite a large group of players joining us.
That was super cool
in the playtest, and like you just see different things happening, because when we playtest our own game, it's like okay, we have our team set create features. Obviously we want to test them, so we're focused on those specific areas, but then you suddenly have players and they've never had this in their hands, and it's like, you know, like the full sandbox of all these new shiny things that they can test and play, and like really cool stuff happens in the playtest that we maybe didn't expect. So I would love to hear from you, like what were our biggest learnings, even just immediately when we had players join us.
One major thing was like the conversation. We saw this in the blog post as well. The conversation about if we like what should we do about the primary weapons.
Yes.
And this was before we had weapon proficiencies in the blog, and they all of that feedback kind of like we got together and kind of reviewed it and came up with the feature of weapon proficiencies. And as we said before, like we really wanted to encourage people, but not kind of take too much away from the favorite weapon combo for a certain specialist that players are used to. So this is like, we believe that this is a really nice middle ground for where this game kind of shines the brightest. So I think for me, a major part from those playtests were what should we do about the primaries, and kind of that spawned weapon proficiencies, which we then got to validate in another playtest and got like kind of a loop back on those things.
So weapon proficiencies, that's completely new for 2042. Like we've had the class system before, obviously. For 2042, weapon proficiencies is completely new. I think it's a very exciting future. So you touched upon it earlier in our discussion, Florian, but do you maybe want to go into it further and give some more details about like the other proficiencies that we have? So you touched upon the recon one, but what are the other ones? And I guess I would also love to know, how did we go about, like, why did we choose these specific proficiencies for each class?
Yes, so the way we've been thinking about the proficiency and which weapon types we've selected, because we wanted categories of weapons that are best to be played with certain classes. And for Assault, it's a class that is going to be on the front line, most likely going to be pretty flexible when it comes to engagement. So we took the type of weapons that are what we call jack of all trades, which are assault rifles, also rigged with assault class. So it was a pretty good fit, and we made those slightly better in the hands of assault. When it comes to support, it's been SMGs. Actually, first it's been LMGs, because of the history baggage around the support name and what it's been in previous Battlefield games, where support has always been the LMG class. So we started there, and this is what we presented to players at some point. I think we made a blog post about this, and we've gotten some feedback around that. And what we realized is that what we wanted to hit with this didn't really quite work. And it was actually better to try to hit what would work for the specific support gameplay that we had in 2042. Support in previous game has been the role that gives out ammo and has LMG. But in this game, it's also the role that revives and gives health. So what that means is that you will be most likely in close quarters trying to reach players that need to be revived. And an LMG is not great at that. So we decided to change this from LMG to SMG because we really wanted to make sure that we have weapons that work for those kind of experiences. And that turned out to work much better than the LMGs.
Yeah. And we've like the designs we posted in the blog post before, but like we've continued to iterate on them. So there's going to be like some differences from what players have seen before. And we really wanted to make sure we had something that didn't like in a weird way make the weapon just OP for this class. We wanted to something that kind of fits with the role. So for example, with SMGs, you could have that you could swap to the SMG faster. I think that's where we landed, which kind of really has a nice synergy with like throwing down a smoke, then bringing up your SMG again because you're in that close range, or like swapping to your defib so you can now manually hold. And I'm really excited that you can actually sap enemies again. I really push for that one. And then swap back to your SMG. So like it's something that we think fits the role really well, but necessarily doesn't make you like damage enemies or like you're not stronger against the enemy in the fight itself. It's just that it fits the role.
And I think creating the weapon proficiency, since we don't want to make those weapons too strong in the hands of each class, it's a very, I would say, delicate balance. So I'm personally very much looking forward to see how that plays out. And I guess we will be reviewing like how it plays out in the hands of players, and we're ready to stand by and make changes if we feel it's necessary.
For sure, yes. I mean, we've already made changes based on the playtest that we've had with players some weeks ago now, where we've seen that assault proficiency that we had before, where we just had like faster sprint to fire time, was not really working well. I think the main concern that we had was around how this could make the assault class very overpowered. Obviously, assault now is kind of like the selfish class in a way, which we're completely fine with for Battlefield 2042, where we want a role that can sustain themselves into most engagements, but not infinitely. So you have access to the med pen, which you can use once, and then you will need to get help from a support after that. But you have some chances to survive. But the combination of this plus the armor plate, for example, plus the proficiency that made you go faster into most engagements to fire faster, was a bit too strong. We've had that feedback pretty clearly in some of the playtests that we've had. So we've already changed that because we had that feedback. So yeah, it's been interesting, and yes, we will be doing more changes as we see how players adapt to those weapon proficiencies. It's a fine balance because we don't want those to be so good that you feel like you have to play that weapon with that class. As we said, it's an attempt to encourage players to play with those weapons, but not force them into that. And if it's too good, then you will like kind of feel like you're forced to play with those weapons because that's just what works best with this class. So it will be interesting for sure, and yes, we'll make adjustments.
And as you said, like with the med pen, we really like we've changed so you only have one charge of that. So it's actually more like if you played BF5, the self heal you had with the pouch. So it's just like a one-off thing. You can restock at an ammo station, but it's a one-off thing to kind of help you survive a little bit longer on the front line.
Yeah, and you can actually get those back from health crates for us. So,
yeah, that's cool.
So you can run to medics and get those back pretty easily.
I thought of one thing that also came up from the playtest that's actually like a big change. Like we moved Crawford from we swapped Irish and Crawford, their classes. Yep. So Irish is now a support and Crawford is an engineer, which also kind of has prompted us to change their traits a little bit. So maybe, Florian, you could go into a little bit more detail on that.
Yeah, it's been an interesting change. We've had a lot of feedback around Crawford not really quite fitting as an engineer, or as a support. Sorry, before you had a lot of scenarios where Crawford would put down his sentry gun, but he would just stay there, right? And then you see downed players in your team that need revive, but Crawford is just sitting on the sentry gun, which was a bit conflicting in terms of like, what is Crawford meant to do? So we had a go at that, and we tried to move it around, and we ended up moving Crawford into engineer. So much like Boris, for example, that also has a turret, Crawford has also a turret, although it's a stationary turret that you manually control. We made Crawford slightly better against vehicles. Now the stationary machine gun can damage vehicles a little bit, just a little bit. So it's a bit useful against that. But it's also a specialist that will not be much better at repairing vehicles with a new trait that allows to repair faster, like twice faster, when the vehicle health is below, I think it's 25% health. So if you can pull out your repair tool just when a vehicle is really critical on health, you will be able to save those vehicles in that way. And you
when
can
they
also,
need it the most.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And you can also
cool.
repair most gadgets twice faster all the time. That's an extra added bonus to Crawford. So in those changes, we made sure that we can build like an engineer identity around Crawford. But to make sure we even out the classes that we have, we've moved Irish, which has before been an engineer, into support. And the reasoning behind that is that we want the shoot down sentinel to be something that is really good to help your team, but mostly the soldiers in your team. Much like it's been, for example, in Battlefield 4, where we had the, I think it was also called the AMPS, which was mostly something you use to help your infantry soldiers in your team in choke points and things like this. So we felt like it was a pretty natural choice to move Irish into support. On top of that, Irish has the deployable cover, and we figured out that it would be actually a very interesting combination to be able to deploy some cover when you're trying to revive someone.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it felt pretty natural to imagine that, oh, you know what, I need to revive this friendly player in my team, but they're very exposed in this open field. With Irish, I can deploy some cover and get a revive off pretty nicely.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty nice choice. And I do anticipate that in terms of like support usage, I think Irish will probably climb.
I'm very curious actually, because like it's like when you look at it now in retrospect, it's just a very natural fit for him to be in the support role. So I'm actually very curious now that we enforce the class identity for, you know, our specialists, or especially Irish, if he will actually be used that way more, because like it will help players figure out as well, like, see, okay, he's support, like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm gonna put this cover down in front of my friends. Hopefully they stay alive. But if not, then you know I can revive them.
Yeah.
And you have like the shoot down sentinel. So yeah, I think Irish will actually see a lot more playtime. Like he's quite strong, and he's a very cool kit as well. What do you guys think?
I think it's just a perfect fit to the support class. Like now that we've actually playtested it more and made the change, it just makes sense.
And his new, I think we did change his trait or specialty.
Yeah, exactly. So we previously had Crawford having a trait that gives some gadget ammo back to players that are revived. That trait moved to Irish now. So that gives like extra reasons to pick Irish, because when you revive someone, you also give them ammo back.
And since Irish previously had like he has had armor tied to his trait before, so now armor is like exclusively for the assault class.
Exactly. So you will not see as much armor anymore. And actually, armor is something that we're constantly looking at in the game. It's been, I would say, contentious with the sentiment from the community around how armor can affect most engagements. So we're still looking at this, but we're trying to make sure that it's a bit more rare to have an encounter against soldiers that have armor. And this change will help with that, because if you want armor, you will have to play as Assault. And in Assault, you have some other gadgets you might want to have instead. I think C5 is probably one I can think about. So those compromises you will have to make might mean that you will see some armor every now and then, but not as much as before.
Okay. And I mean, we already covered Irish and Crawford, but the return to the class system comes with a whole set of balance changes in general. So I would love to dive a little bit deeper into that topic and maybe give some more examples of like the balance changes we made to like the overall specialist roster, and yeah, what your expectation is for how this will play out on the battlefield.
It's super interesting. We have so many layer of changes with this rework that we've had to think about what could potentially happen after this, and we've had players playtest this and give us some feedback. And one of the main feedback we've heard is that this change will probably mess with vehicle balance quite a lot. So we looked at that quite closely, and we made sure that the engineer class is really good against vehicle. So we've made adjustments around rocket launchers across the board to make sure that they're effective against vehicle after those changes. Since you will not see as many rocket launchers on the battlefield, we want to make sure that those few rocket launchers are pretty good against vehicles. So there's been some tuning around that. Of course, this 3.2 changes also come with some more changes to the vehicle play. For example, the AMPS is going to be available pretty much on all tanks. So that's extra things we're looking at to see how rocket launchers versus vehicles works after that. So there might be more changes coming in after this initial release of the rework. But that's the kind of stuff we've been looking at in particular. And the rework also comes with a bunch of extra additions to the All-Out Warfare experience. You're going to see some of the gadgets that were only available in Portal now available in All-Out Warfare, like the Javelin, for example, the EOD bot. We've also added some of the recon gadgets that were available, for example, in the Battlefield 3 experience with the tugs. The
tracer darts.
Exactly, yeah, the tracer darts. A bunch of extra tools that we've added into the mix that we've also carefully reviewed and made sure that they really fit within the All-Out Warfare experience. So it meant a bunch of changes to them, some quality of life improvements as well. And this should overall help, I think, with the offering of gadgets that are available to each classes. But we're also going to see how players will pick up those extra gadgets and how this will affect the way people play the game. So that's going to be very interesting. We've also looked at, of course, every other gadgets across the board to make sure that they really work well and are balanced. So I have a hard time remembering every single changes because
you don't have to go to every single change.
It has been a lot of changes, but we actually didn't really follow the main vibe that we got from the community around, hey, please just move RAW to recon to engineer, because that's how I use it today, because that's not what we want from RAW, and we want some interplay between the recon class and the engineers. We don't want a RAW to become like a one-man army type of specialist that has no counter, is too easy to execute the way it is today. So we've done some changes over there, which are quite substantial, where we've allowed the hacking tool. I don't think that's quite the name. I think it's Cyber Warfare Suite, right? The Cyber Warfare Suite now also locks the vehicles that you will be targeting. So you will have some nice new interplay between RAW and the engineers. If you equip the rocket launcher as an engineer and RAW marks a target, you will also be able to lock onto that target.
It's better for squad play.
It is for sure much better.
Cool. So I think it's nice that we, like, instead of moving his class, like, we made changes to make him fit better in like the role that he's supposed to play and really add to the team play. And Oliver, like, question for you, like as a big Battlefield fan and like a player, how does it feel that we're bringing like a lot of gadgets from Portal over to to All Out Warfare, and, and that we bring him back to the classes, like some fan favorites.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm nostalgic. Let me just start with taking a biscuit here.
Yes. What are those biscuits called in Swedish?
Hallongrotta.
Hallongrotta.
Yeah.
There we go.
Some raspberry thing. The first game I played was Bad Company 2, but I never owned it myself. That was my friend had it, and then I played. But then Battlefield 3 was the first one that I owned, and I have so many hours in that one. I played like every day after school with my friends. We were 4 friends that were a full mate squad. I always played. I was always reviving people. That was like my role. I've always liked that, and like seeing, it's just so nostalgic bringing back some of those gadgets, and even just like the tugs. Just, I don't know. It's something that connects it with the previous Battlefields for me. The tracer dart is a really nice like synergy from the Recon class to be able to connect with the engineers, with their rocket launchers. And the EOD bot is just like crazy fun. Like, I don't know, driving the EOD bot into a house full of enemies and just like poking them with the sapling tool. Like it's so much fun.
Like those fun moments.
Yeah, but it also like just widens the arsenal. I think BF3 had a lot of good gadgets. BC2 of course as well. So just bringing them in just gives a big, like a wider variety to the game.
Okay, awesome. I feel it's gonna be a lot of fun just seeing those extra. So we're bringing structure, but we're also bringing back some like, I guess, favorites that, and like, I just don't know what's gonna happen. We have new options for gameplay, so very excited to see it play out myself.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of guesses as to what could happen, but I think we're gonna not really imagine too much and see how it actually plays out. And then we'll probably make some adjustments based on what we're seeing. But it's exciting times to just see things shift around, balance of the game change a little bit, the meta shift a little bit.
I think it's good that if the meta shifts every now and then. But just one thing to add there. So we will have an episode probably in early February where we answer listener questions. So we will have a Q&A about update 3.2. So if you have any questions once you've played, let us know. You can reach out at podcast@battlefield.com or at Battlefield on Twitter. So just, as soon as the update is out, end of this month, let us know your questions, feedback. We're looking forward to covering that in an upcoming episode. Then I would love to go a little bit into the UI. So we changed the gameplay, like we changed the balance, but there's much more work that takes place for the return to the class system. So I think, Oliver, this is something you'll be able to speak to.
Yeah, from like a tech perspective, actually, the biggest part of our changes are in the UI. So we've actually changed. So we no longer have the loadout screen, which was called before in the collection, and now instead have a dedicated classes screen. That is like your go-to place to find info about your classes, what specialists are in those classes, what gadgetry they have, but you can also, that's where you edit your loadout nowadays. With that change, we've kind of, we wanted to move over to having class loadouts, since gadgets and throwables are not like universally available to all specialists anymore. We can't have like the custom loadouts used by all specialists. So we really wanted to enhance like the class gameplay to have these class loadouts. With that change, it just made sense to like edit those with the specialists in the classes screen. Like there's so many UI changes, so it's
little small changes.
Yeah, like small polish things are everywhere. Like we changed icons. We've added the class icons above soldiers in the in-game HUD, so you can like more easily spot an engineer or support. We've added those icons to the scoreboard, so you know like how many players play each class in the team. What can I pick to kind of synergize with that? Like there's too many small things to mention, and I'm like really excited to see players like pick up on these small changes.
Small
we
little
made.
details. But ultimately, I think the end goal it is more intuitive.
Yeah.
And everything we work towards is to make like the identity of class, your role on the battlefield, but also like the identification of friendlies, enemies. It's much easier with these added UI changes.
Yeah.
And one important thing I think I do want to add is like you touched upon a little bit, like your loadout is now specific to your class. So
Yes.
before you had like your loadout for like Oral and Irish, they were separate, but you know, like you have your loadout for the engineer class. So it should be much smoother to switch between like the different engineer specialists because you have your loadout ready. You can just jump in.
Yeah.
But before, like you had so much freedom, but it also meant more tweaking around with how you want your specialists to play and what available options you had. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we kind of playtested that and tried having like one loadout per specialist, etc. But it just ended up being like too much work for the player. Like you don't want to think about that. You want to pick like the loadout that fits your character and then get into the game. But this we kind of found a nice middle ground where it's tied to the class. And one really important thing to mention there is that since we no longer have like the custom named loadouts, the loadouts will be resetting. So when players boot up the game in 3.2, the custom loadouts will like not transfer over because you might have picked like a rocket launcher for the loadout you usually use for like assault. So that means that we have to kind of reset them to something that makes sense. All your like progress on weapons, everything will remain, of course. It's just that those 4 things that you select, the primary, the secondary, the gadget, and the throwable, you will have to rechange those, which I think you might want to do anyway, since it's such a like a meta change to the game that your previously picked gadget might not even be the one you want to play with anymore. So that's an important thing to mention. But also this loadout system kind of brings it into how it actually already works in Portal, where like the loadouts are tied to the class. So now it's just more consistent and coherent in the whole game.
Yeah. So I think when you first boot up the game, once the update is live later this month, just maybe scroll a little bit through the menus, go check it out, check what is each class, what do they have available, set up your loadouts, just spend a little bit of time just browsing everything that's new, which is something I always like doing. Like whenever a new update launches, to see what has changed. And I think it's interesting you mentioned Portal, but how Portal is now, like you can still play those traditional classes in Portal and set it up the way you want to there, so that gameplay doesn't change. So if you want, if you have enjoyed that gameplay, like that's still available in Portal, correct?
Yeah, so we've added 2 new modifiers to the Portal website, where you build your custom game mode. So if you want to set up a game mode or like a specific server where all specialists in 2042 have access to all the regular gadgets again, you can do that because there's just a simple switch. There's one for gadgets and then there's one for throwables. Those will like change the available gadgetry for you, but they will not be like a full revert of the changes we've made. So for example, the class gadget slot will still remain. Okay. So toggling that switch will not bring back the spawn beacon to all classes, because that's the class gadget for Recon. But it will make sure, or like allow you to have a rocket launcher with Sundance and the wingsuit, for example.
Okay. Great, so we've got a lot of changes coming in this update. So what I would love to hear from both of you is how do you think it will play out on the battlefield once the changes are live? But also, what are you looking forward to the most personally? So Oliver, let's start with you.
Oh, I think for me it has to be, like, of course, just seeing players play what we have made. That's going to be nice, but especially the more usage of the repair tool, since you always have that with you. But also just the defibs. Seeing players finally like sap people again. I always found that funny.
Because you were the reviver, that was your role.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome. Florian, what about you?
So yeah, I'm very excited to see how players will pick up the different specialists and the classes now. I'm anticipating that we'll see a lot more team play, since now you will have to actually make a choice to deal with the different situations on the battlefield. So if you see a tank, you will have to select an engineer to deal with that. So you'll see that all over the place, also with support and having to revive, provide ammo and health. What I'm also excited about is to see how the vehicle balance will play out, since we've been making so many changes and there's been other additions as well on the side with the AMPS available now on most of the tanks. This is going to change how the game plays quite a lot. So I'm excited to see that go live. And we're looking at potential extra changes based on how things will look like, but we'll only really know once the players have their hands on the update.
Yeah. So, folks, we'll be closely monitoring how it plays out. We're ready to stand by with additional changes if necessary, and please give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. I think that closes it out for us on the return to the class system today. It was very, very nice to have a deep dive into that. But Florian, I think you had one further change you wanted to mention?
Oh yeah, yes. So we're making some changes to gamepad controls on controller, of course, because we've had to add the extra class gadget. We've had to reshuffle some of the controls on controller. So when you play the update, take a look at your controls. Some things will have probably changed a little bit, so you might have to do some adjustments again. But hopefully those changes make sense.
Okay, it's going to be with your muscle memory the first time you will probably press the same buttons.
Yeah.
But okay, so looking forward to that update launching later this month. So before we close off for today, let's do a quick recap of what's coming this week. So we have the Community Spotlight Gunfight Royale going live on Tuesday, Rush Hardcore. Obviously, Exodus Conquest is still available, as it was the week previously. We have a new podcast next week, going live on Monday, where we do a deep dive into 3.2. So today we talked about the return to the class system, but obviously there's a whole more set of changes in the update. The breakaway rework, active protection system coming to more tanks. We've got new vault weapons, just a whole set of balance changes, and below radar for aircraft. So we'll dive into that next week. If you have any questions for us, do get in touch with us via podcast@battlefield.com or find us on @battlefield at Twitter. Like, we're looking forward to your feedback, thoughts on the podcast, anything you want to chat to us about. We will have a dedicated Q&A podcast a few weeks from now after update 3.2 is live. And of course, I want to thank you both, Florian and Oliver, for being here today in our very first Inside Battlefield podcast. It's
been really nice. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah,
it's nice to talk about this finally.
You're welcome. Like, it's good to chat some Battlefield and have a cup of coffee with it.
For sure. Yeah,
it's been good. Could go on about an extra hour of this.
Yeah,
easily.
So
it's a long episode.
For everyone listening, obviously we wanted the podcast to be around 30-45 minutes, so you could relax, walk the dog, listen to it. But I think we just we kept talking and it went a little bit over. So I hope you enjoyed it. So we're looking forward to hopefully hearing you or seeing you, having you join in next Monday. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, play the objective. See you in the next one, folks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What are we having for lunch today? Pineapple pizza?
Yeah. Are you on Team Pineapple?
Yuck.
Okay. Yeah. Great.